Welcome back. Today we're making these delicious and colorful Funfetti cinnamon rolls. To make the dough, we're adding 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour into the bowl of our stand mixer, along with 1 teaspoon of salt and 2¼ teaspoons or 1 packet of instant dry yeast. You can also use active dry yeast in this recipe, but it might take a little bit longer for the cinnamon rolls to proof. We're going to give that a quick little stir just to get those ingredients incorporated, and then next in a separate bowl we are adding 1 cup of whole milk, 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, and 1/4 cup of butter. We're going to pop that into the microwave for about 90 seconds until it's warm to the touch, and then we're going to pour this into our dry flour mixture in 3 installments. Adding it slowly gives the flour time to absorb the moisture, and it just helps the dough come together better. To make this dough, I'm using my dough hook and my stand mixer, but if you don't have one, that's totally fine. This recipe can absolutely be made by hand, and I've done it several times when I'm at home for the holidays. Once we've added in all of that milk mixture, our dough should start to come together like this, and now it's time to add in our beaten egg. So this is just 1 large egg, it's at room temperature. I've mixed it with a fork to make it a little bit easier for us to work it into the dough. So we're going to mix this on a medium speed for 2 to 3 minutes until the dough becomes a little bit more elasticy, and then we're going to add in a bit more flour to make it easier to work with this dough. The amount of flour you have to add in can vary a lot based on a ton of different factors, so I like to just add it in 1 tablespoon at a time until the dough starts to pull away from the sides of the bowl. Now you might end up having to add 1 additional tablespoon or maybe 5. I usually end up adding about 4 to 6 additional tablespoons, but the goal is as soon as the dough starts to pull away from the bowl like you can see here, that's when it's time to let the dough rest. So we're going to get our dough off of our dough hook, get it down to the bottom of the bowl, cover our bowl with some plastic wrap, and just let it rest for about 5 minutes. During this time, I like to work on my cinnamon roll filling. So I'm adding 1½ tablespoons of ground cinnamon and 1 teaspoon of cornstarch to 3/4 cup of light brown sugar. The cornstarch might sound weird, but it helps the filling stay in place as the cinnamon rolls bake. So our dough is all ready to go. We've got a little bit of fog on our plastic wrap, which is always a good sign. And now it's time to start to roll it out. It's really important that you flour your counter super well before you roll out your dough because you don't want it to stick and tear, and especially with these cinnamon rolls because we're kind of rolling it out twice. So take your rolling pin and start to roll out your dough, and once you're about halfway through, sprinkle 1/2 cup of rainbow sprinkles onto your dough and kind of press them into place either with your hands or you can push your rolling pin lightly over them to press them into the dough. Be careful though because they can break, so don't be alarmed if you do get a few sprinkles stuck to your rolling pin like this. So once they seem like they're pretty well put in the dough, we're going to fold it up on top of itself to kind of laminate the sprinkles into the dough. So I like to fold it up kind of like a letter into thirds, and then I fold it into thirds the other way as well. Then I add a little bit more flour to our counter just to make sure that our perfect little cinnamon rolls don't get stuck, and I roll it out 1 more time. I like to roll my dough to be about 18 inches by 10 inches, just because I like my cinnamon rolls to be pretty tall, and I'm only going to cut 9 pieces out of this dough. I'm adding my remaining 1/2 cup of sprinkles onto my dough that's rolled out to the right dimensions, and I'm going to repeat that process of kind of patting them into place with my hands and using my rolling pin. Now this next step might seem a little bit odd, but I take my 1/4 cup of butter, I pop it into the microwave for 10 to 15 seconds to partially melt it, and then I kind of add little bits on top of my sprinkles. And just using the back of a rubber spatula, I start to spread it around. So as you work the butter around, you'll find it actually spreads pretty nicely over those sprinkles, and if you're having trouble, just try heating your butter up a little bit more and it should spread like a charm. Next, we're adding our cinnamon roll filling on top of that, and we're going to try to get it really evenly spread across our dough, and then I like to pat it down with the back of a spoon just to help it stay in place as we roll. Be sure that you do leave 1 inch on the long side of your dough uncovered with butter or any filling, just so that way you'll be able to seal off your cinnamon roll log once it's fully rolled. So I really like to take my time here and work from one end to the other, and I find that just working slowly and doing a little bit at a time is the easiest way to get a nice clean roll. Also make sure that you kind of press your ends back in. I find that mine always want to kind of squish out as I'm rolling. So once your cinnamon roll log is ready to go, I like to use a ruler just to make sure that my cinnamon rolls that I cut are going to be equal sized. And then I actually like to use dental floss to cut my cinnamon rolls. I know it might sound crazy, but it really cuts through the dough so cleanly, and a lot of times if you try to use a knife, it can kind of squish your cinnamon roll log and cause you to not get a super clean cut, and you really want that perfect spiral when you're making cinnamon rolls. I like to cut 9 pieces out of my cinnamon roll log, and I'm placing them in a square 8-inch by 8-inch pan that I've greased with a little bit of nonstick cooking spray. If you want to make more cinnamon rolls, you totally can, just note that they'll be a little bit shorter than mine are. So once all my cinnamon rolls are cut and ready to go, I cover them with some foil and I place them into an oven that I've actually preheated to 200 degrees and then turned off. So this is called an assisted rise, and once your cinnamon rolls have risen, you can preheat your oven to 350 degrees and bake them for 25 to 30 minutes or until they're golden brown. While they're baking, I like to work on my cinnamon roll frosting. So this is actually just a really small batch of my vanilla buttercream that I like to make for cakes. It felt appropriate just because Funfetti does kind of remind me of a cake flavor, and I kind of didn't want to add cream cheese to this. So this is just a half a stick of unsalted butter, to which I've added a pinch of salt, a teaspoon of vanilla extract, and a teaspoon of almond extract. And then I'm slowly incorporating 2 cups of powdered sugar, and I'm adding in 2 tablespoons of heavy cream or whole milk just to help smooth it out and loosen it up a bit. So once my cinnamon rolls are baked, I let them cool for about 5 to 10 minutes because I do want the frosting to melt on them, but I don't want it to just like completely run off. So this is the perfect amount of time to help them get that ooey gooey frosting look without having just a pool of butter underneath them. So once I had covered all my cinnamon rolls, it was just honestly fun to watch the frosting melt on them. I added a little bit of extra in between them just to help make sure that all the dough is covered with this delicious vanilla almond frosting. I then added some additional rainbow sprinkles over the top just because I want people to be able to look at these cinnamon rolls and know exactly what flavor they are. Also, the almond extract in the frosting is totally optional. I just love to add it to my Funfetti recipes to make them a little bit more special. So now it's time to dive in and finally enjoy our cinnamon rolls, which hopefully have come together in just a little bit over an hour. So these cinnamon rolls are fluffy, they're soft, they're absolutely delicious, and they are packed with rainbow sprinkles. If you guys want to make these at home, the recipe is also up on Chelsweets.com.